A little girl in a bright summer dress stood at the gates of Buckingham Palace, dwarfed by the towering walls and the even taller soldier guarding them. While others snapped photos and laughed at the guard's stillness, she did something no one expected. She lifted her tiny hand and waved. Most thought he wouldn't respond. After all, royal guards never break. But then, the unthinkable happened. His reaction melted every heart in sight. And what happened next has been seen by millions around the world. The sun hung high over London, casting golden light across the forecourt of Buckingham Palace. Tourists lined the black iron railings, cameras clicking, children hoisted onto shoulders for a better view. For many, this was the highlight of their trip, to witness in person the immovable royal guards in their bright scarlet uniforms and towering bearskin hats. Among the crowd was a young family. Their daughter, no more than 6 years old, pressed her face against the bars of the railing. Her eyes widened at the sight of the guard before her. He was immense, a soldier standing tall with perfect posture, rifle at his side, eyes locked straight ahead. To her, he seemed like a storybook giant come to life. But children are unburdened by the rules that adults silently follow. Where grown-ups whispered, "Don't distract him, don't get too close," the little girl only saw a soldier who perhaps might be a friend. Without hesitation, she lifted her small hand above the railing and gave a cheerful wave. At first, nothing happened. The guard remained motionless, a statue in red and black. The crowd chuckled softly, some shaking their heads knowingly. After all, the guards were famous for their discipline. They were unshakable, unmovable, unbreakable. But the girl didn't give up. She wiggled her fingers again, tilting her head, her eyes sparkling with hope. The family urged he. Gently. "All right, darling, that's enough." Yet she kept her hand raised, smiling as though she were greeting an old friend. And then it happened. The guard's head shifted ever so slightly, a movement so subtle many missed it at first. His arm twitched, and in a single fluid motion, he lifted his hand from his rifle and returned her wave. The crowd erupted with gasps and laughter. Phones shot up into the air to capture the moment. The girl squealed with delight, waving harder, as though she had just unlocked a secret between herself and the towering soldier. What was supposed to be just another day at Buckingham Palace had instantly turned into something unforgettable. Not just for her, but for everyone watching. For most people standing there, the moment felt almost unreal. The royal guards are legendary for their discipline. They don't laugh, they don't smile, and they certainly don't acknowledge tourists, no matter how silly, rude, or persistent those tourists might be. To see one of them respond, even in the smallest way, was like catching a glimpse of a secret crack in an otherwise unbreakable wall. The little girl's face lit up instantly, her cheeks glowing pink with excitement. She turned back toward her parents, jumping up and down, her tiny voice squeaking, "He waved! He waved at me!" Her joy was pure, infectious. Even strangers in the crowd smiled at each other, some shaking their heads in disbelief. The guard's movement was brief, just a simple wave, but it carried the weight of something much greater. Here was a man trained to ignore distraction, to remain motionless, no matter the circumstance, suddenly allowing himself a flicker of humanity. What made it even more powerful was the contrast. Around the girl, dozens of adults had been trying for minutes to provoke a reaction. Some posed exaggeratedly in front of him, others pulled faces, a few even cracked jokes. The guard, as expected, didn't move an inch. He stood tall and impassive, the very picture of discipline. Yet one innocent wave from a child was enough to pierce through the armor of silence. The crowd reacted instantly. Cameras clicked, videos rolled, and whispers spread like wildfire. "Did you see that? He waved. He actually waved." People who had been milling about suddenly leaned in, hoping to catch another glimpse of the extraordinary moment. For the little girl, however, the wave wasn't a spectacle. It was simply kindness. She waved again, and though the guard quickly returned to his rigid stance, she giggled and clapped as if she had been given the greatest gift of her young life. Her parents crouched beside her, smiling, aware that what had just happened was incredibly rare. They whispered gently, "That's very special, sweetheart. He doesn't do that for just anyone." And they were right. Guards are not entertainers. They are soldiers. Their discipline is so intense that even the most determined pranksters usually fail to get a reaction. That's why this wave was so extraordinary. It wasn't just a soldier acknowledging a child. It was a soldier breaking centuries of tradition, if only for a moment, to show the world that even beneath the bearskin hat and the rigid uniform, there beats a human heart. The moment itself lasted mere seconds, but the energy it created lingered long after. People in the crowd spoke about it with warmth, sharing smiles with complete strangers. Some even looked at the other guards differently, as if trying to imagine what they might be feeling under that stoic exterior. And as the family eventually drifted back into the sea of tourists, the video evidence of that wave, captured from multiple angles, began its journey onto social media. What began as a fleeting exchange between a child and a soldier was about to become something far bigger than anyone there could have imagined. To fully understand why that single wave meant so much, you need to know the history and role of the Royal Guard. To the casual tourist, they may look like part of a grand performance. Statues in red coats and black bearskin hats, standing in front of one of the most iconic landmarks in the world. But behind the pageantry lies centuries of discipline, duty, and sacrifice. The King's Guard, formerly known as the Queen's Guard during the reign of Queen Elizabeth II, is not ceremonial decoration. They are active duty soldiers drawn from the most elite regiments of the British Army. Every guard you see outside Buckingham Palace has trained in combat, some having served on deployments overseas. Their presence at the palace is more than symbolic. It is an active security duty, carried out in plain sight of millions of onlookers every year. From the moment they don the scarlet uniform and place the heavy bearskin hat on their head, the guards step into a role that demands absolute control. They are drilled to ignore distractions, no matter how loud, how silly, or how tempting. Shouting tourists, intrusive photographers, or mischievous pranksters, none of it is supposed to break their stillness. The Royal Guard's reputation rests on one key principle: immovability. That's why the little girl's wave was extraordinary. In a world where thousands of adults try and fail to earn even the slightest reaction, a child succeeded without effort. She didn't yell, didn't mock, didn't invade the guard's space. She simply offered an innocent gesture of connection, and against all odds, it was reciprocated. Think about the rarity of that moment. Most visitors leave Buckingham Palace with photos of unsmiling soldiers in perfect formation. A few leave with memories of stern shouts if they step too close, but almost none can say they experienced something human, something personal. That little girl now belonged to an incredibly rare group of people who managed to touch the heart of a royal guard, if only for a second. Historically, breaking composure has always been frowned upon. Accounts from decades past tell of guards punished for even the smallest grin or head turn. They are instructed to remain professional at all times, because their role is both ceremonial and protective. A lapse in discipline could, in theory, be seen as disrespect to the crown or as weakness in the face of provocation. And yet, here was a soldier who chose humanity over protocol, knowing full well that every action in front of Buckingham Palace is captured by dozens of cameras. What does that say? It says that traditions, no matter how rigid, can still bend in the presence of something as pure as childhood innocence. The guard's reaction wasn't about breaking the rules. It was about acknowledging a moment of simple kindness. For once, duty made space for humanity. And this is why the moment struck such a chord, not just with those present, but with millions online. People aren't amazed by the little girl alone. They're amazed by what she unlocked. A glimpse of the man behind the uniform. The contrast was powerful. Stone-faced soldier, unmoving for hours, suddenly softened by a child's wave. Psychologists often say that children can disarm people in ways adults cannot. They bypass the layers of formality, the barriers of social expectation, and touch something universal, our shared sense of innocence. This moment was proof of that truth. It also highlighted something else. The Royal Guards, despite their reputation, are not machines. They are men and women who have families, emotions, and a sense of humanity beneath the strict layers of discipline. The little girl's wave reminded the world of this fact, something many forget when they reduce the guards to tourist attractions. In the grand history of the British monarchy, this wave might seem like a footnote, a fleeting moment on an ordinary day. But in the digital age, those fleeting moments have the power to ripple out across the world, reminding millions of viewers that tradition and tenderness can coexist. And that, perhaps, is why this story mattered so much. It wasn't just a child waving at a soldier. It was the collision of two worlds, one bound by centuries of discipline and another glowing with the innocence of youth. For a heartbeat, they met in the middle. What began as a fleeting moment at Buckingham Palace soon exploded far beyond the palace gates. Within minutes, smartphones had captured the exchange. The tiny girl's wave, the guard's surprising response, and the crowd's audible gasp. A few taps later, clips began appearing on social media platforms. By the time the family had left the forecourt, their little girl had unknowingly become the centerpiece of a viral story. On TikTok, the clip gained traction almost instantly. Viewers shared it with captions like, "Even the royal guard couldn't resist this little angel," and "Proof that kindness breaks barriers." Within hours, it was being reposted across Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts, and Twitter threads. What was just a few seconds of interaction soon became a symbol of warmth in a world often dominated by harsh headlines. The comments poured in. Thousands of strangers wrote about how the moment brightened their day. Parents related to the innocence of the girl, while veterans admired the guard for allowing a moment of softness without compromising his duty. Some joked that she had achieved what countless adults had tried and failed to do, break the unbreakable. Mainstream media caught on quickly. News outlets in the UK reported on the heart-melting Buckingham Palace wave, while international channels framed it as a universal story of humanity breaking through rigid tradition. Headlines painted the guard as both disciplined and compassionate, while the little girl was celebrated as a reminder of pure, childlike sincerity. The story struck such a chord because it wasn't just about the guard or the girl. It was about what the exchange represented. In an era where so many viral videos highlight conflict, chaos, or disrespect, this one highlighted something rare: joy, kindness, and respect. What made the clip even more powerful was the contrast with other viral guard videos. Typically, videos of the Royal Guard involve tourists overstepping boundaries, standing in their path, mocking them, or even touching them, only to be swiftly corrected with booming shouts or forceful movements. These videos spread because of shock value, but this one spread because of heart value. Instead of fear or laughter, it evoked smiles, warmth, and even tears. Soon, debates began online. Some argued the guard had risked breaking discipline, while others insisted his action was precisely what the world needed to see. The majority, however, agreed on one thing. The wave showed that soldiers, while bound by centuries of tradition, are still human beings with the capacity for empathy. The clip even sparked reflection among tourists. Discussions emerged in travel forums about respecting the guards, reminding people that they are not props for entertainment, but professional soldiers carrying real weapons, performing serious duty. Ironically, the viral wave ended up reinforcing respect rather than undermining it. By the end of the week, the video had accumulated millions of views across platforms, turning both the guard and the little girl into global symbols of a simple but profound truth. Even the strictest traditions can hold space for humanity. To truly understand why this single wave mattered, we need to step behind the towering gates of Buckingham Palace and into the world of the royal guards themselves. Their striking uniforms and immovable stances might seem ceremonial, but the reality of their role is anything but theatrical. These men and women are soldiers first, symbols second. Every guard standing watch outside the palace is a trained member of the British Army, often drawn from elite regiments like the Grenadier Guards, Coldstream Guards, or Scots Guards. Many of them have served in combat zones, experienced the rigors of active deployment, and endured the highest levels of military discipline. When they arrive at Buckingham Palace, they bring that same seriousness with them. One of the defining traits of a royal guard is stillness. The training is exhaustive, hours upon hours of standing motionless, learning to suppress every reflex and impulse. Whether it's an itch on the nose, sweat running down the temple, or even harsh weather conditions, the guards are drilled to ignore it all. Their immobility isn't just about tradition. It's about demonstrating discipline that transcends ordinary endurance. Why such discipline? Because their duty is layered. On one hand, they are a symbol of continuity, embodying centuries of royal tradition. On the other, they are protectors, tasked with safeguarding the palace and its inhabitants. That dual responsibility, to be both symbol and shield, demands an almost superhuman level of composure. Now, imagine what it means for such a soldier to break that composure. To outsiders, it might look like a small gesture, a harmless wave, but for the guard, it represents a conscious choice to step momentarily outside of rigid protocol. It means allowing humanity to surface by. In a context where discipline is the rule of law, that's why the wave to the little girl was so astonishing. It wasn't routine. It was a rare, deliberate act of kindness. Stories of royal guards breaking discipline are few and far between. Occasionally, tourists catch a glimpse of a faint smile or a whispered exchange between guards during a shift. More often, the moments captured on video involve the guards responding with force, stamping their feet, shouting commands like, "Make way for the King's Guard," or pushing back those who cross the line. These reactions are not anger. They are protocol, designed to maintain order and protect security. The wave, however, belonged to an entirely different category. It wasn't about enforcing rules, it was about connection. And this is where the discipline of the guards becomes even more fascinating. Their training teaches them to filter distractions, to separate what is hostile from what is harmless. When adults jeer, mock, or invade their space, the guards treat it as interference. But when a child waves innocently, their judgment may allow for a brief crack in the armor. This delicate balance between discipline and humanity is what makes the guards so revered. They are symbols of unshakable order, yet moments like these remind us they are also individuals capable of warmth. It's not that they are supposed to wave back. In fact, they are explicitly instructed not to engage, but sometimes tradition bows to humanity. Think about the contrast with military tradition elsewhere. Soldiers in many countries are known for their rigidity when standing guard, yet countless viral clips show them scolding, ejecting, or even arresting disrespectful tourists. Rarely do you see a gesture of kindness. That's why the guard's wave wasn't just extraordinary by British standards. It resonated globally as something almost magical. In that single gesture, centuries of discipline and tradition met the innocence of a child's world. The guard demonstrated that discipline does not erase compassion. Rather, the woe can coexist, even if only for a fleeting moment. For the millions watching online, this realization reframed how they saw the guards. They were no longer faceless soldiers hidden beneath bearskin hats. They were fathers, brothers, sons, people with the same emotions we all carry, people who could still be moved by something as simple as a child's wave. And that, in many ways, is what made the moment unforgettable. It wasn't about breaking the rules. It was about reminding the world that even the strictest roles are carried out by human beings. To understand why the guard chose to react in that extraordinary moment, we have to peel back the layers of protocol and tradition that define their role. The Royal Guards aren't street performers, and they aren't there for entertainment. They are professional soldiers with strict rules of engagement. Every movement, every command, every stomp of their boots is deeply tied to centuries-old regulations. So under what circumstances are they allowed to break their stillness? The first and most important rule, crossing the line. This phrase isn't metaphorical. It's literal. Around Buckingham Palace, clear boundaries mark the safe zones for tourists. Anyone stepping over those barriers, touching the guard, or blocking their marching path has crossed the line. In those cases, the guard is authorized to react, loudly, immediately, and forcefully if needed. That's why we often see clips of guards booming, "Stand back from the Queen's Guard," or thrusting tourists out of their path. It's not aggression. It's protocol. Their weapons add weight to these rules. Those rifles they carry aren't props. They are fully functional and, when required, loaded. Guards are not just symbolic, they are the first layer of palace security. And unlike the tourists who often see them as photo opportunities, the guards remain constantly alert, Need to assess potential threats in a split second. That's why their silence feels so intimidating. Beneath the uniform is a soldier prepared to act. So where does that leave the little girl and her wave? Why would a guard trained to resist distraction allow himself to respond? The answer lies in training and humanity. Guards are conditioned to ignore provocations, the laughter, the silly faces, the shouts. But their training also teaches them to recognize innocence versus intrusion. A child waving from behind the line isn't breaking protocol, isn't mocking tradition, and isn't a threat. It's harmless. And that distinction creates rare moments where a guard may choose compassion without compromising duty. There are real accounts of this balance in action. Some tourists report being shouted at for stepping too close, yet those same guards later offered a discreet nod to a polite passerby. One famous example involved a child dropping a toy near a guard. The soldier broke stance only long enough to gently kick it back toward her. Another clip shows a guard whispering "hello" under his breath to a nervous child who saluted him. These are not scripted moments, but instinctive human responses allowed by judgment. Contrast this with tourists who deliberately test boundaries. In those cases, guards have reacted with military precision, stamping their feet, shouting commands, or even drawing bayonets. One viral clip showed a man blocking a guard's march, only to be shoved aside as the soldier marched straight through, unfaltering. These incidents serve as reminders that the guard's first duty is security, not spectacle. The wave to the little girl was different because it didn't cross a line. Instead, it hovered just outside of the rigid rules, presenting an opportunity for kindness. The guard didn't abandon discipline. He exercised judgment. He gave her a moment she would never forget, while still maintaining the dignity and authority of his position. This is what makes their reactions so fascinating. They are trained to remain statuesque, yet also to explode into motion at the slightest sign of threat. Somewhere between those two extremes lies a narrow space for humanity. A wave, a nod, a gesture. Rare, fleeting, but unforgettable. And perhaps that is the real reason the clip resonated so deeply. It showed the world not just the rules of discipline, but the judgment of a soldier who knew when to enforce them, and when to let them soften. The wave itself lasted only a second, but the impact rippled far beyond Buckingham Palace. The little girl's delighted gasp, the collective awe from the crowd, and the subtle but unmistakable smile on her parents' faces all became part of a memory frozen in time. But in today's world, nothing that happens in public truly stays only in memory. Within moments, dozens of smartphones had captured the scene from different angles. By the end of the day, the footage was online. And once it hit social media, it exploded. Clips of royal guards confronting disrespectful tourists are common, but this was different. This wasn't a guard shouting or pushing someone back. This was humanity, tenderness, and warmth breaking through centuries of stiff tradition, and people couldn't get enough of it. On TikTok, the clip was looped with captions like "Even soldiers have hearts" and "Discipline meets kindness." On YouTube, reaction videos popped up overnight, with creators analyzing the guard's decision and praising his small act of compassion. On Twitter, the clip sparked a heated debate. Was this a heartwarming exception, or should guards remain entirely rigid to preserve tradition? What united almost everyone, though, was admiration for the guard's composure. He hadn't broken protocol recklessly. He hadn't engaged in a way that undermined his duty. Instead, he had shown that strength and compassion could coexist, even in one of the most disciplined roles in the world. The tourist videos reached millions within days, and news outlets quickly picked up the story. Headlines read, "Royal Guard breaks tradition to melt hearts," and "Little girl gets the wave of a lifetime." For a brief moment, the world's attention shifted from politics and conflict to something simple, pure, and human. But the viral spread also sparked conversation about respect in cultural spaces. Commenters pointed out how often tourists try to antagonize the guards, pushing boundaries for the sake of entertainment. Those clips usually end in embarrassment as the guards bark commands or force people out of their way. This time, the contrast was sharp. The child's innocence had been met with kindness, while countless adults had only ever provoked discipline. People drew comparisons with other famous clips. The guard who stomped his boot at a tourist leaning too close, the soldier who marched straight through a crowd that refused to clear his path, or the guard at Windsor who shouted so loudly it sent a group of men stumbling backward. Against that backdrop, this wave stood out even more. It wasn't about intimidation. It was about connection. The little girl may never fully grasp the scale of what happened that day, but millions around the globe did. For many, it became a reminder that even in the most rigid traditions, humanity can shine through. And for the royal guards themselves, it was proof that their reputation is built not only on discipline, but also on judgment, knowing when to enforce rules and when to quietly bend them. In the end, what happened outside Buckingham Palace that day was more than just a viral moment. It was a reminder that beneath the polished uniforms, the immovable posture, and the centuries of tradition, the royal guards are still human beings. Their job is one of discipline, duty, and unshakable focus. But as the wave to that little girl showed, discipline doesn't erase humanity. It can exist alongside it. The world often sees the guards as statues with rifles, more symbol than soldier. Tourists crowd around them, testing boundaries, pushing limits, and forgetting that these men and women are professionals carrying out serious responsibilities. Yet through one small gesture, a guard reminded everyone that he wasn't a prop for photographs. He was a soldier who chose, in a fleeting moment, to let kindness shine through. This is the crucial difference between curiosity and disrespect. The little girl approached with innocence. She stayed behind the line, respected the boundaries, and offered nothing more than a wave. And because of that respect, her interaction was met with warmth. Compare that with the countless adults who ignore barriers, shout in faces, or block a guard's path. Those encounters end very differently. The lesson is clear. Tradition deserves respect, and when given, it often gives something remarkable in return. The guard's reaction also highlighted something deeper, the delicate balance between tradition and humanity. For centuries, the guards have stood as symbols of unwavering discipline. Yet even within that rigidity, there is room for judgment. The fact that a soldier could maintain his composure, uphold his duty, and still find a way to connect with a child proves that strength is not diminished by compassion. It's enhanced by it. People of the power of small gestures, of innocence, and of respect. In a world that often rewards conflict and chaos, this simple wave stood out as a story that united rather than divided. And maybe that's why it mattered so much. The viral clip wasn't just about a guard and a little girl. It was about what they represented: tradition meeting innocence, authority meeting respect, discipline meeting humanity. So, what can we take away from this? Next time you stand at Buckingham Palace or anywhere where history and tradition are alive, remember, you are not just a spectator. You are standing in front of people whose roles carry weight, responsibility, and pride. Treat them with the respect they deserve, and who knows, you might witness a moment just as unforgettable. If this story warmed your heart, make sure to hit that like button to help more people see it. Don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories like this, and tap the notification bell so you never miss out on the moments that reveal the human side of history's most disciplined traditions. Because sometimes the smallest gestures create the biggest memories.